Hi guys, so today's video is going to be both a non-spoiler book review and then a spoilery chat for Illuminae by Amie Kaufman and Kristoff. So I am definitely way behind the game here when it comes to this story because it's been out for a while now and most of you are probably already aware of this story, but I personally, even though I'd heard so much about the interesting format in which it's written, basically knew nothing else. So if you are still in the dark like I was, this book follows two main characters. There's also some other stuff because of the whole interesting format, which I'll get to in a second. But it follows two main characters, one named Katie and one named Ezra, and their planet gets attacked, and then they are refugees on these rescue ships, and then things get crazy from there, and they don't really know what's going on. You as the reader, you're not really sure what's going on, and it's just a kind of a space opera adventure story from there. Most of the story is told through messages that are sent between the two main characters, as well as messages that are sent between people that work on the different ships, or sometimes you'll get surveillance footage. You'll get somebody who is putting stuff into a diary of sorts, and so you'll get a journal entry, those kinds of things. So you never really get traditional narration in this story, and I was always a little apprehensive because I guess I'm just super basic. I just like words on the page in nice paragraphs. I usually don't like too much artsy stuff. I like little artsy things. I like when chapter headings turn out to actually tell you something, or like little things. I like little things. But an entire book of that kind of a format, I was definitely very intimidated and unsure, even though everybody said, oh, you'll be fine. And everybody was right. It was fine. It was not a hindrance to the story for the most part. There were a couple things that I didn't like, but I would say overall it really increased this book's intensity levels. It definitely made it very unique, and I didn't feel like it was gimmicky in any way. It didn't feel like they were trying to just be cool to be cool. The only time that I would not agree with that is when occasionally there would be pages where the font was, the letters were kind of written across the page in kind of a swirly pattern or things like that. And those ones, that is where the basicness came in, because those ones I'd have to turn the page and then I would just get annoyed and then I was frustrated. So that was a little aggravating for me, but not in a way where I was like, oh, the whole book is ruined now. A lot of you lovely folks recommended that I do a combination of reading the physical book and listening to the audiobook. And I always found that to be a little funny because I thought, okay, well, if one of the main cool things about this story is the format it's written in, won't the audiobook kind of take away from that? But it really didn't. I think it was a great suggestion because the audiobook itself, they add little things to it also. It feels very sci-fi-y and techy, which I really, really enjoyed. And I think it definitely helps me have the characters in my head a little bit better because you don't have traditional narration and because you don't have normal character dialogue. It can make it slightly more difficult to feel connected to the characters. It would be like if you took somebody's phone between them and their spouse or something and you just kind of scrolled through the messages between them. Sometimes you're gonna get really deep stuff, sometimes you're gonna get sad stuff, sometimes you're gonna get weird, funny stuff. It's like trying to care about characters in that way. But anyway, how that relates to the audiobook is when you are looking at these private messages from one character to the next, sometimes they are coded messages, so it's not a character's name. Sometimes it'll be some kind of a code name because there's hacking involved in the story and things like that. And for me, it just was a helpful reminder. Whenever I would listen to the audiobook, I would associate that username with that voice. And so when I was reading it, I would kind of have that voice in my head. There were other things that I think were beneficial about bouncing back and forth between the two. One thing that I thought was done well on the audiobook and in the physical copy I actually didn't love was that this is obviously a young adult book, so you can't have tons of colorful language in this story, but colorful language is realistic, especially in a lot of the situations that the characters are put in. They're put in high-stakes situations and sometimes violent situations, and characters being like, oh no, oh golly gee willikers. That's just not really how people talk. So what they would do is, these are a collection of files. At the beginning of the book, you're under the impression that somebody is going through a series of events that has transpired, and you're about to find out about those events. And they omitted the curse words by just blacking them out. And when reading the physical book, it was a slight interruption for me when I was trying to read through a sentence, and then there was just a black blob covering the curse word, and there was a part of me that's like, just leave them out then. Like, I would get kind of frustrated, and I appreciated the realism, but from a not being pulled out of the story perspective, it was a teensy bit annoying, just a teensy bit. But again, not at all in a way where I didn't like the story as a result. It's just because everybody talks about how interesting and different the format is, I do want to talk about that. But in the audiobook, all they did was basically bleep out the word. So it was very clear what they were about to say, almost like when you're watching TV and they bleep out a curse word. So it worked really well for the audiobook, and then for the physical book, it annoyed me a little bit. I don't think it's really going to annoy very many other people, though. Expanding on the whole concept of realism, though, and this book trying to really show what people would actually act like, I would say that because our main characters are roughly 17, 18 years old, that sometimes they would do things that you might think, come on, what are you doing? Stop it. Or they would start having arguments about things where you think, this is not the time to argue about this. Little things like that, which I appreciated them doing that because, one, humans rarely, when they're worked up, sit back and are calm and collected and really think about things with a critical eye. A lot of times we get flustered and then we get angry and we snap at people, especially if those people are people we know really well. And I do think it was realistic in that way. I think they behaved their age, which I also appreciate, but it was one of those things where it didn't necessarily make the characters awesome and super amazing, because they're not the kind of characters that are above it. They do really heroic things, and they're characters that you want to root for. Just sometimes they're annoying. They act like real people, and real people are annoying. There's definitely a lot more to the story. There's some pretty intense what happens when you get a bunch of people in one place. What kinds of terrible things might occur. There's stuff like that. There's kind of an exploration of trauma and PTSD, which I thought was really well done. And there are some really gripping moments. There's some really intense high stakes moments. There's also some moments that are a little bit slower and sweeter. There's a lot to this story that I think a lot of people are really going to like. I think if you're looking for something unique and different, you'll probably really love this. But if you're super basic, you might not enjoy it at all. You might be frustrated and feel like you would have liked the concept of the whole story had it not had a more interesting, artsy way of delivering the story. I do want to jump into some spoilers now, so if you don't want to be spoiled, stop watching now. Okay, so the biggest thing that I want to touch on in the spoilers section here is the whole Ezra's dead. Just kidding, no, he's not. Yeah, he really isn't. That whole chunk, there's too much book left for me to believe that Ezra was dead, because I just was like, I really don't think he is. The last chunk was really intense and had so much going on, and it was just one thing after the next, and poor Katie was, she's having to deal with these people that are basically really fast, intelligent zombies, and she's got a ship coming after her, the AI is breaking down, just so much is going terribly for this poor girl. But she's lost so much, and she's willing to sacrifice her own life because she knows it's for the greater good, and she also maybe wouldn't mind because everybody she loves is dead now, all that stuff. And the whole idea of she has to believe Ezra is dead because she wouldn't go through with this if she knew that he was just, over there on the other ship. I just didn't believe it. Was I supposed to? I just thought there were moments that I was like, I don't think he is, though. I don't think it was always just the AI. And I was kind of thinking back, and there's a part of me that almost wished he had been dead the whole time because I am a sucker for tragedy. And so that would have been really intense, but awful for Katie. But I will say I am glad that he wasn't actually dead. I was glad they got to be together in the end. I thought it was a very good ending in that regard. I like that it set up so much for the sequels, but I just never believed it. Did you guys believe it? Was I not supposed to ever really think he was dead? I don't know. I just never really believed he was dead. I still found myself rooting for them, but I almost wish there had been a little bit more, like we got her journal entries. I wish we had gotten more things with Ezra, and I know that there's a lot set up for his mommy being super evil in the next ones, but I kind of wish we had explored that a little bit more in this one. I kind of wish we had dived deeper into the things that went wrong for him and Katie. I know it basically boiled down to he just didn't want to leave because of things going down, and that really hurt her feelings, and she thought he just didn't love her enough, and whatever. I got that, but sometimes I wished that their relationship could have been dived into a little bit more. But I know I'm annoying and I'm always wanting more of the characters themselves, and this book I think it's like a love story in the midst of all this chaos. And it's supposed to be really fast-paced, and you're supposed to not really know what's going on because the characters don't really know what's going on. But sometimes I was like, can I know what's going on a little bit more? I always felt like I was playing catch-up, and I still enjoyed the story. I still really appreciated how different it was. I definitely didn't want to put it down in a lot of spots, but I am just always craving the slow, let's just sit and think moments, and I didn't really get as many of those as I personally maybe would have liked. Anyway, that is it for my non-spoiler and then spoilery book review and chat for Illuminae. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to enjoy it, because I am so traditional when it comes to the delivery of my stories. I rarely like really interesting writing styles, and so this, where it's told through all these different journal entries, text messages, video surveillance, interviews, all that stuff, I was just thinking like, I'm not gonna like it, but I did have a really good time reading it. I think if you're intimidated by the format, give it a try. Try the audiobook if you'd like, maybe try a combo, because I think that it's not as intense and interesting and different as one might expect. It still ends up reading pretty normal in a lot of ways, but it was unique, and I really liked what they did with it. But anyway, that's it. Let me know your thoughts on this story. If you've not read it, let me know if you're interested in reading it, and I'll see you all later.